let's go on. So yeah, hi everybody. My name is Ansis. I am from Latvia, indeed. I will switch on my presentation for background slides, but I will say it straight away that my presentations are usually made of pictures more than text. So it's more like a background inspiration sometimes rather than much of information. Yeah. So yeah, I was invited today to talk to you about starting an NGO, a few legal steps, and also a bit of a funding base for that. But at the same time, I think it's important whenever we talk about setting up a new organization, it is important to talk also about some principles, not just the legal steps, but also about some principles, how it all starts and why it all starts, and so on. So yeah. And also, I have to keep in mind that we are so this webinar is intended for people from different countries. So of course, I will try to be careful with too many legal details when it comes to that setting up of an NGO. But let's see when we get there. So whenever something feels like irrelevant, too much or too little, or something missing, please feel free to to jump in and adjust the story where it goes. I'm ready for that. So maybe a few words at first about who am I and maybe what could be the reason why I'm invited here to talk to you today. So as Christina already mentioned, I'm currently, well, actually for last 5 days, finance manager of Active Citizens Fund. And it's not that something has gone wrong or I have changed my mind. It's just that the program has ended actually in 2024. So Active Citizens Fund is a program which is funded by Norway, Iceland, and Liechtenstein, three countries in Europe, not being part of European Union, but funding projects in, how to say, the lowest income countries in European Union. So it's pretty much Central and Eastern Europe, like all Baltics, Czechia, Slovakia, Romania, Bulgaria, Greece, and also Portugal. So yeah, it's a program where we have funded almost 200 projects over the time of 2020 till 24. So for 5 years, there has been different international activities and so on. So it has been quite an intense, but also good experience on different national and also very local small projects on democracy, on human rights, and also on capacity building of different kind of organizations which are somehow related with civil society development. So what we have been doing, maybe that's what I didn't clarify yet. We have been, I have been working for Civic Alliance Latvia, which is the umbrella organization for NGOs in Latvia, and it has been a lead partner for implementing the Active Citizens Fund program in Latvia. And our role was legally, it's called fund operator, which means we are given money from donors and we are the ones who do the project calls, project selection, project monitoring, and support to all those projects that has been supported. So we are not the classic project implementer, but we are fund operator in charge of supporting other projects after we have selected them. So that has been our job recently. The program is over. Now it's the final reports of the program, but the new program of the same three countries is coming up by the end of this year, maybe early next year. So that's now is the bid process of fund operator until April. So it means now organizations in Latvia can apply to be fund operators for the next period, again, to distribute 10 million euros for civil society in Latvia. But otherwise, my life geographically has always been between two regions of Latvia. So I'm now back in my hometown, living in a small town or village called Sabile. It's in Talsi region in Kurzeme. But how to say, my beginning of my professional time was actually for almost 18 years in Valmiera, which is on the northeast part of Latvia, close to Estonian border. I've been a director of Valmiera Region Community Foundation, which is a local philanthropic organization for Valmiera region. We worked mainly with local donors, local inhabitants, and companies raising money for different small projects in Latvia. But at the same time, it has always been also interconnected with international activities and experience exchange. So yeah, it's I've been involved with non-profit world since 2002 and with different projects on different levels, like being as an implementer of projects or now recently for the last 5 years being in charge of monitoring projects and organizations on different scales. So I have seen different things, different good and bad examples, but yeah, not all of them could be shared, of course. But I have like tried to bring it all into my presentation and lessons learned, so to say. So when we come, to like the main topic of today's story, which is setting up a new organization. I do think that so it's like I do assume that if you have come to this need of setting up an organization, it means that there has been some reason, I assume, and most probably it also implies the concept that you want to be an active person who wants to do something, who wants to change something, who has either identified some problem or who has got some new ideas. And so, we want to change the world. But then I do believe that this whole feeling of changing the world might feel that you are in a super beautiful Latvian forest, but at the same time, it may also feel that, all of these forests are always a bit mysteriously dangerous. You never know where you can maybe get lost, or maybe you can see some other risks. Or like in this case, we have a forest which is full of rainy ponds, and like you kind of, it's like it's beautiful, it's inviting, it's nice, but how not to get lost in that beautiful forest. So I think that's where we are with this story. But at the same time, I really want to encourage everybody that, at least I can say it for Latvia, that the process of setting up or starting an organization is rather simple. Yes, there is always bureaucracy or some paperwork around anything that we do, and it's logical. But at the same time, I think the general process of how to start and how to operate organization in Latvia is rather simple. I cannot say the same for other countries because I'm not familiar with many countries of setting up. And I know for sure that in some Western European countries, the whole process is much, much more complex in a way. Let's starting with the fact that you need to have some starting capital of loads of money sometimes to set up an organization. That's not the case for Latvia. The cost of setting up an organization in Latvia is 11 euros. I mean, it's low cost. So technically, that's it. Technically, that can be enough to start things. You need just few people, and you need just 1 to 2 weeks to start up an organization if you want to go on. Of course, it may not be as simple as I say right now if you want to do it in a quality manner, and if you have you may always experience some more obstacles and challenges on the way. That's true. But at the same time, it may be as simple as I say. It also, of course, gets more complicated when you start working with public money. I mean, with governmental money, with international EU funding or that kind of stuff. And that's again very logical. I think that's fair enough that as soon as you start working with public money, which is taxpayers' money, it's logical that it takes more kind of more monitoring and more kind of being more watched than if it's just your own private initiative. But if you keep it in your private initiatives level, it's just your colleagues that are doing great things voluntarily. It's as simple as can be. I believe so. It also depends very much if you are alone in the process or if you already have a great team that you're starting things with. And several things will depend on that. And we will come back to these. We will come back to my peers or my supporters or my team. I think not just a single time during our conversation today. But I would say for an easier and smoother process and also for better results, it would be great if you're not alone. But at the same time, of course, we all know, and especially in our part of the world, in Latvia or Baltics, or probably in whole Central Eastern Europe, we do have some challenges with cooperation among each other. It feels in many cases that it's easier for me to do things on my own, because then I don't need to, I don't need to adjust. I don't need to kind of make agreements. I decide and I go on and I do and I do things. And sometimes that's fine. But I do believe that in many cases, if you have peers along with you, they can be of great support. They can be helpful when things get more complicated. Uh, those peers can also be helpful when things with peers get complicated. That's also might be possible. But still, I mean, cooperation, especially if we want to do things for public good, um, I think having people around you is not just helpful, but also not mandatory, but I think kind of fundamental or crucial, that it's also to validate that what you think is good is also good in other people's opinions. And that's one of, I think, very critical things when we want to do things for public good. You need to validate it, because and not just for the sake of getting support from others, or not just for the sake of getting funding, for example, but it's also just for the sake of not doing like not going in the wrong direction, because um, it may happen that we believe that we have wonderful ideas. We are super happy about what I just had a wonderful dream yesterday night, and now I have to go fight for that, and it must happen. But then if you talk to maybe five more people around you, you find out that, yeah, it was a good dream, hmm, but maybe not today, and maybe not here, or maybe it is a good dream, but we need to adjust it somehow. And so I really believe that it is great that we cooperate or talk to other people before we go on with some major things, so to say, major decisions, and setting up an organization, or starting up a new organization. It is kind of a major thing. It's not complicated, as I said, but still it is some greater step to make. It's not the same as going to shop for bread or milk. So yeah, I think it makes sense to have peers, partners, colleagues, friends next to you. Um, and then when I thought of what does it mean to set up an organization, I could come up with four potential reasons why new organization might appear in our minds. There might be some more, and I'm happy if you continue my list. But I could identify four major reasons why, or maybe the platforms where the new organization might usually appear. So first thought that I see in many cases, which is the reason why a new organization appears, or the thought of setting up an organization appears. It is some kind of a problem or need that we have identified. Like we're living our life and we meet an obstacle, we meet a problem, like this must be changed, like this is wrong, or this should be improved, so to say. So we meet some kind of a problem, smaller, larger, but anyway, so there's some kind of a problem or need that could or should be solved, changed. The second thought would be that there is an idea or a dream, just like I said previously, or we see an opportunity. And I do believe that also when we talk about project management or how the project starts, it's pretty much the same way. And we will come back to that a few minutes later. But also there, the classical thinking is that there's a problem or need which needs to be solved, and that's logically that it is one of the classical ways how to start thinking. But I do believe that sometimes also good organizations or good projects may start from a good idea or nice dream, wonderful opportunity. We see maybe there's not so much like not so crucial problem that needs to be solved, but there's a great opportunity which can be used it's still for public good. It is still for benefit. There is benefit in it, but uh, but it's not that much problem, but more of an idea or dream or an opportunity that we want to like, hey, let's do this. I could I could think of the third reason, it could also be that we have a group of people, a group of like-minded people or group of friends that came up that just wish to act together, and that could be a really strong reason or strong motivation for good achievements, also for good benefit or for public good or for local community, or even just for those people themselves, because organization, of course, don't always need to be for public good. Organization can also be for like a member driven, for those people who are initiated it for themselves, right? Not commercial, but still for the good, for a limited number of people. So I think if there is a group of motivated people, like-minded people who have a great idea, or maybe they don't have idea yet, or they don't have a problem yet, they are like sitting together or came together and they feel like we are a strong team, we have to do something great, and then we kind of looking for an actual problem, or we are kind of dreaming together to find out some good opportunities or good ideas. So this could be also, this is for me, I could identify this as the third reason or space for organization to grow. And then the fourth motivation that may happen is when we see money available somewhere. I do see it as the weakest motivation, or like not that the weakest motivation, but maybe the least sustainable motivation, so to say. But it is often the case that maybe person alone, or maybe a group of people see, oh, there's some project call published, or there's some funding available for this or that project. So why don't we think of some kind of project that we could do together, and maybe get that money happening. Um, yes, it is possible, but in my opinion, it is a short-term way to go, because it means it might happen that you actually are not so target driven, or you're not so much driven towards solving some things, or you may also come up that actually our team is not as strong as we thought it could be, because money can be kind of how to say, money can be a really tricky trigger in a way, because because whenever we see money available, then yes, we are interested, because we all like money, and why wouldn't we like money? I mean, because we need money, that's for sure. But I think it's much better if it starts from other way around, and the money could be found if there is a good idea, or if there is some bad problem, or if there's a great team that is strong together, then they will find money for those good ideas or bad problems. So yeah, then if these things are, one of these triggers is happening, then yes, we might come up with, okay, so why don't we set up an organization, right? Then let's see how, if I try to put these things into step by step, what happens next. Depending, of course, these steps might be probably a bit different depending on how it all started, right? If you already have a great team of 10 people who are like, yes, we are going together for something, then you probably don't need to find more peers, right? Then this step is can be skipped. If you are alone on the first step, then I think for setting up an organization, you need to find at least one peer. Even legal requirements require that. So the legal requirement for setting up an association is that you need to have at least two members, at least two founders. So that means you alone legally cannot set up an organization. So it means you need to have at least one more peer that you are setting up an organization together with. And here I probably need to go one step back. When we think of setting up a legal organization in Latvia, there are two legal forms of non-profit organizations. It can be either association or a foundation. They are both how to say, the principles are different, but the legal steps are pretty much the same. But in this case, I will talk about associations because that's the classical way of organization. Foundation is more uh, like the legal what the law says about foundation. It is setting aside certain amount of resources for a certain objective. So it is more like not because there are people who want to do something, and not because there is a problem that needs to be solved, although it could be partly, but legally foundation is a chunk of money or chunk of resources that are set aside for achieving some kind of objective. And usually foundation starts when there is some money that can be aside, and then of course additional money can be raised and so on. But yeah, foundation is more supposed to be also a bit more heavy than association. And foundation does not have members, which usually when we usually think of an NGO, we think of an organization that has members that is a driving force of that organization. So I will stick with the concept of association when I talk about setting up an organization here. So yeah, and then as I said before, that legally there must be at least two people, but then depending on what the purpose is, you might need actually more. Because I think if you are heading towards a more public engagement, and if you are setting up an organization that wants to say that, oh, we are the representatives of young people in Kuldiga, I think it would be unfair if you set up that kind of organization, just two of you, because how can two of you say that you are representing youth of Kuldiga? I mean, you can't really say that, right? You need to have some more bigger representation of young people in your team, and then you can think of that. And sometimes what it means, like finding peers, might mean that, okay, so we are currently three people at the table, and we have some good ideas, or we have identified some problem, and now, but we need actually some more people in that are going with us. And so then what happens then, and it may happen that before setting up an organization and before starting any legal procedures, you actually spread the word, and you are looking for other like-minded people that, hey guys, we are thinking, what if we set up the youth organization for things getting better in Kuldiga or in Valmiera, whatever. um, and if you want to join the club, please let us know. And then depending on, maybe you already set up the date when some first meeting can happen, and then people can join, or you maybe just have a first communication online, or you have individual conversations with people. But anyway, so there might be this first step of finding peers, like really getting public. But it can also be that you just find your peers among your own kind of networks within your bubbles. So let's say I can share my one of rather recent example. 2 years ago, 2 years ago, the association Sabile Satistibai for the development of Sabile, my small town, started. I moved back. So I moved back to my town 5 years ago, very shortly before COVID started, and then a couple of years later, there were a couple of people in our small town, which also, because of COVID or just because of some changes in their lives, have moved in. So some new people have arrived to our small town, and then this is how life happens. Then those active people somehow meet each other, and so like two, three, four people met here and there, and then we thought, hey guys, but it's like our small town needs some refreshment. We need some fresh air. We need some. So why don't we come up with uh, with some new ideas and maybe try to think of what we can do together. And at that point, it was like somebody had few ideas what should be done specifically. Somebody saw that we have these and these problems in our small town, and then we were looking for other people who might be also like entrepreneurially thinking, who would be ready to dedicate their time. So I think it took 6 or 8 months when we were talking here and there. So I talked to somebody whom I know, like he might be, interested also to join the party. Somebody else was talking to another people. So at the end of the day, we came 12 people together. It's not like huge group of people. It could not be representative group of Riga, right? Like Riga city. But for our small town of 1,500 people, it's kind of a good group uh, of people who are willing to dedicate their time. So yeah, and then the meeting of so-called official meeting of setting up the organization or founding meeting was finally set up. I have also been part of, like, if I mention my previous longest experience, Valmiera Region Community Foundation, setting up of that organization took more than a year, because intention there is it has to be very open and engaging. It has to be we really needed and wanted that the board of the organization includes people from not politics directly, but more like municipal kind of governance. We wanted to have people from different business sectors. We wanted to have people from education, from media, so on. So that's like more complex story. But I have also been involved with organizations where all of these complexities are not involved, where it's just like we are um, we have three people who want to do things together, and we're done, and we just come to the next step, and we're not looking for more peers. uh, then I think before you go to the third step, which is preparing documents, or when I like the symbolic names for that, but I mean any kind of the legal stuff. I think it is important to have this dreaming phase. That's how I would call it. But I think there must be this space, like that you think of what what are we standing for? Why do we want to set up an association? What do we want to achieve? And who else should be involved? And then, of course, then this is again maybe during this thinking of what we want to achieve, we can come to a question that, okay, to achieve this or that, we actually need few more people who are smart at maybe smart at numbers, and maybe we need somebody who is smart at project writing, or we need somebody who is smart at communications, and we need to actually expand our team. So again, we can come back to that. And all of these questions, what we are discovering during the dreaming phase, they will be needed actually also for preparing your documents. So the dreaming phase is not just for dreaming, and but also for legal stuff. But even more important, I think it is for your group of people, like to come on the same page, like to really understand why do we do this, like what we want to achieve by setting up an organization. Whether the reason at the end of the day is very pragmatical, like we want to build this or that playground, and that's our main reason for being together, like one single straightforward thing. But also that has to be said. It is important that those who set up an organization are on the same page, that they are aligned on it, so that they are they are going for the same purpose. Whether this process is formalized, you write down things or you don't, I mean, it's up to you. It's not, but this is, I think, for you as a group, important process. And then when you feel like, okay, we are on the same page and we are ready to go on, then you can start preparing your documents. you could actually start preparing those documents a bit earlier simultaneously, but you cannot write your statute of the organization before you have decided why are we doing it. And then when we come to the document phase, then of course in different countries those steps might be then sub steps or details could be different. But for Latvia, it is number one, the main document of the association. It is the statute. So it is the fundament. It's your constitution, so to say, constitution of the association. This is where you write what's the name of the organization. You write what's the objective of the organization. This is the place where you also describe and when you decide what the structure will be. So legally, always the top institution will be member, the convention of members, or like the all members of the organization. But it's up to you to decide who do we have any other governing bodies within the organization. Do we have the board? We have to have executive board. In Latvian, it would be valde, right? So it's something that is mandatory. You can give different name to it, but like this, there must be an executive body, usually of at least 3 people. But this executive body can also be smaller if there is another body in between, if there is like a governing or advisory board or supervisory board or something like that. So, I mean, then again, depending on how many people you are and what's your purpose, you could decide that maybe in our governing structure, maybe we need to involve our target audience. So maybe we need to set up an advisory board. I don't know if we are, for example, setting up an organization that is working with people with disabilities, and we want to kind of do something good for them. And we know something about them, but we want them to be involved in the process. And then maybe we set up some advisory board where we invite some of these disabled people who are then asked specific questions, and that's their space to provide advices for us. So structure of the association, it will be part of your statute. It will be part of your documents, so to say, but you have to decide how it looks. There's always the simplest way to go. The state enterprise of state register of enterprises provide example of statute, like the sample of statute document, the simplest version of statute, and you can always use it as like if you want to keep it as simple as it is. But before you do so, please think about it, because I have seen many organizations who are like, oh, we don't want to think about this. Let's just take that simple statute and that's fine. And we just go on with that. And then you start operating for a year. And then you find out, yeah, but how we do this? And where it's written, like, where is, do we have anywhere, have we written like our objectives or tasks, what we want to, like, which direction we go? No, it's not written. And then, okay, and what's the structure? So who decides on this? But these people decide. But why they decide? Why can't we decide it differently? But that's how you have written in your statute. So basically, if you have not thought about your structure or your decision-making bodies, then you can come up to a situation where you are uncomfortable about your structure. You can keep everything as simple as it's written in those examples or the sample statute, but it is important that you have thought it through, that you have thought about it. So statute is your basic document that you start with. Along with that, there will also be a so-called decision of founding, decision to establish the organization. For that one also, there is an example available, and that's something where you probably don't need to too much of creativity. It's fine to use the simple version of that. And yeah, and then another important part of documents is the paying the fees, of course. So you have to pay 11 euros fee to set up the organization. The classical question that I usually I'm asked is like, who pays that? So how does the organization pay its fee if there is not an organization yet? That's the very good question, but the answer is, so you have to decide yourselves who will pay for it. So it's very logical that the first 11 euros will be paid by you guys. That's your investment in your future organization. So if you want to set up it, then at the smallest investment possible is 11 euros for the registration. Um, and then the last step is the legal registration. When you have prepared the documents, then there must be a founding meeting. There must be a meeting where people actually gather. Well, to be honest, yeah, I haven't taken a look recently. I haven't, let's say like that. I have not verified if this founding meeting can be organized virtually. Um, Probably can, but I'm not sure about this one. So that's okay. I have not done my homework fully, because further on, your membership meetings can happen virtually online as well. But normally, I would say that founding meeting takes place face to face, because this is also the moment when you kind of this is the moment when we agree, yes, we do set up this organization. Yes, we do approve this statute with these and these texts, and we sign for that this is happening, and then we are ready to give all of our documentation for official registration. Um, the legal registration phase here happens in Latvia. It is institution called State Registry of Enterprises, or in Latvian it's Uzņēmumu reģistrs. So that's the institution that also registers non-profit organizations, foundations, and associations. Formally, it takes approximately 1 week since the moment when you send in your documents. You have to send all of your documents to the registry. They verify that things are correct, that they are not against the law. Yeah, the law on associations and foundations probably should be observed before you set up your organization. But yeah, so these, I think it's not really, then that would be another 1 hour if we go into those very, very, very details of the law about the requirements for the organization. I could in a minute we could open actually a screen of the state registry, how it looks actually to send the organization to send all the registration documents. But before that, I wanna just few things that I maybe wanna make you think before, like that you will need when you set up your organization. So one question that people usually ask: do we need a bank account? Legally not, but of course, once you start working with money as the new organization, you might need bank account. But that's not requirement by law. It's not like human that you need it since the first day. No. What is mandatory for sure, it is accountancy. So before you set up your organization, think of this, how you will organize your accountancy. If you don't have any single euro in your organization, if you keep it voluntary, without any money coming in and out, then the accountancy is super simple. It's just annual reports with zeros in it, right? Then it's simple. But as soon as you have any numbers coming in and out, accountancy has to be set up, and it has to be done by by somebody. So either it's your executive body, your executive director who does it, or you have in your members somebody, or have some good friends who can voluntarily do accountancy, or you are paying a salary to an accountant or you have a company who does it. It depends how much you do. But just think that this will be needed. Another small technical detail, you will have to have your membership register. It can be a simple Excel sheet, but you need to have it so that you know who is your member, so that you know how many members you have. A simple membership registry, but it is needed. But all of these details that I mentioned now, they should not delay your so to say, they should not delay your actions, but they will be needed. So I will switch to state registry, to the enterprise registry website to show you how the registration technically looks. Maybe it can be interesting for somebody. I just need to sign in, so just a minute for that. And then I can switch to sharing the screen. Okay, so I will yeah, we'll come back to presentation later, but then so yeah, basically the good news is that the registration of new organization is now done online. It can be done online. You don't need to send anything by post, and you don't need to deliver anything on your own to any office. So you don't need to think where is the closest office of the state registry, because historically you had to know which region you belong to and so on. But now it's just you do things online. And so here's the here are all services are available here in the Pakalpojumu catalogs, the catalog of services, and you find the new association. So here it is, new association. Also under the information bubble, you get some basic information that can be helpful, just as a reminders. But otherwise, you just click on the plus button here, and we go on, continue with documents. And this is your space, this is your platform where you can add necessary documents. You come up with your new organization's name. I just need to write something so we can go on. I hope nobody has the organization called Little Bubble. Let's see. No, it doesn't exist. Very good. So, and this is also the moment when the registry will also check if the name of the organization is available, because you cannot use the name of already existing organization. And this is where you come to adding needed documents. So these 4 documents that are mandatory. Number 1, it is so-called application. You can download it from here. A bit confusing thing is that, so I would technically suggest that you actually start this online template before you're establishing meeting, because otherwise you cannot pre-fill those documents. So you have to get these documents. It is the easiest way is to get these documents from here, but to download them from here, you need to start the draft of the application. The good news is that you have a chance to to stop it at one point and save it as a draft without submitting. So basically, you start with choosing the name, then you download here. You can download the template of, it's called B2 template, which is for the application template that has to be pre-filled. It's a Word document that you save on your computer, that you pre-fill, and then later on you will add it here, signed and filled. Then this is the second that I mentioned. It's the official decision of founding the organization, and there is an example available. And this is where I already mentioned, where I propose that creativity can be avoided at this point. It's fine to use the super simple version of it. The third mandatory document is agreement, not agreement. I lost the word. Like it's the signature that the executive body agrees to be in charge of the executive body. So if you decide that your organization will have the executive board of 3 members, then each one of those 3 people have to fill in and sign this agreement document, which basically says that I agree to be the member of executive body of organization this and that. Why it is important? Because executive body of association is legally responsible for operations and liabilities of the organization. So it means if organization gets in trouble, then the executive body is personally responsible for those trouble. So whenever you go into a board, into executive board of organization, remember that it's your private property that you are responsible with. So it's just something that you have to be always careful about this. So what it means, it doesn't mean that you should not be going into your organization. It means that you should be reluctant to go into executive board for somebody else's organization, not knowing what happens there. So if you are in executive body, you take responsibility, and then it is important that you have power on making decisions on what's happening, and you have control over the processes somehow. And then here's also this last what I mentioned, the statute. So here is the here you can download the sample document. You may have done, maybe you have some sample available from other colleagues, from friends, or you have got it somewhere else. But anyway, so you may not use these samples. That what you have to do here is you have to upload pre-filled and signed documents, but you can choose to download them at first here. So basically, I'm just looking for the chance where was it possible to save the draft. What you see here, I mentioned it's 11 euros. Actually, if you fill the documents online, you get €1 discount, so it's actually 10 euros and something. Yeah. So if you do things online, it's also cheaper and also simpler. And then can I review? I will just check because I have not done the registration for a while, the whole process. So let's see. No, it doesn't allow. So the draft. Okay, so without uploading documents, the draft cannot be saved. But anyway, so then at least for getting those sample documents, you have to start the process. Here you can get the sample documents if you want to use them. And then you can come back to this process later on and restart it again. It was not complicated, as you saw. The only thing that I did actually was just type the title of the organization, nothing else. And that's about it. So yeah, and then in my slides, I will show you one more link that can be useful. I will show it here. Like there's I would say the registry, the State Registry of Enterprises actually has built rather good website that is not just the space for getting examples and doing the registration, but it also gives a good picture and story, like the consultation, provide rather good consultations about setting up the organizations. And I will there will be a link in the presentation as well. So I'm coming back to the presentation now. So is the presentation back? Yeah. Okay. So yeah. So here are those websites where you can find the information on the first. This is a website where the state registry has good information about how to do things, and then the second link is about where the actual registration happens. To do what is important to keep in mind, to do the registration online, you must have the electronic signature, either in your ID card or e-mobile, or potentially the qualified smart ID can be a solution as well. But yeah, but you have to have the electronic signature and electronic signature tools to actually use it. But if you want to run the organization later or sooner, you will need it anyway. So if you don't have it, it's a good reason to get them. Okay, Christine, if there are any questions so far, if you probably you would say so. No, so then I go on from the registration part. I go on then to the next question that I was asked.
Maybe,
Where to find?
I actually have a question
Okay.
that happened recently in my mind because of different things going on in our organization. How it is about changing the statute after some time.
Yeah.
So, for example, yeah, we get a new decision during the meeting of the members, and then it is just us changing the statute, or we need to inform the register and upload the new statute again
Yes.
there.
Yes, you have. So basically,
Mhm.
it is important to keep in mind that everything that first of all, you always have to make decisions internally. So your members make a vote on changing the executive body, changing statutes, changing whatever else doing. Internally, these things come into force from the moment of decision, unless it's voted differently, right? But all of these changes must be registered with the state registry. So basically, then if I mentioned the magic number B2 for registering a new organization, that's a B2 template. Then there's a B3 template, which is for registering the changes. So for changing the statute, changing address, or changing executive body, it is mandatory and also very important to make these changes official through the registry. And then you can use the same online website where you can find the register to how to register changes, and you will upload the decision of members, you will upload the new statute, and then within a week they are approved by the registry, and then they also publish it online. And since that moment, those changes are also binding to other organizations. There is this small nuance which is important, especially when the signatory person is changed. For example, the executive body, right? For example, when you decide out of 3 members, you change 2 of them, and they are allowed to sign the new documents, new contracts, new applications, whatever else. But for them to be able to do that, they have to be registered, because otherwise nobody else knows that they are actually elected to be your representatives. So yeah, these changes. But then going one step back, it is probably important just to say very loud and clear that it is possible to change your statute in your life several times, like actually not limited. It's just because it is some process. So I would encourage you not. It's just like with constitution. I keep comparing, right? It's like you would not like to change your statute every month, and also not twice a year. But I mean, it may happen that maybe you have 2 changes within a year, and then maybe for 5 years you don't change anything. And some organizations have not changed their statute for 10 years or 20 years, but some change it every year because maybe some nuances change, life is changing, and so on. But this is also a good reason, a good reminder why you should not write. You should be careful about using words in your statute, not to write uh, too detailed information in it in a way. But at the same time, sometimes I have seen statutes which are too general. When I mean not to be too concrete, not too specific. So don't write your address in the statute. It doesn't need to be there. Don't write email addresses in statute. Don't write names of people in there. Also, try to avoid using geographical terms in a way that those administrative kind of territories, especially I mean in Latvia, we have experienced two or even more administrative territorial changes in the last 15 years. And then if you had your statute which says that I'm working for Ilūkste novads, right? And then it doesn't exist anymore. So what is it? So now you have to adjust what's your new territory. But you could use, for example, city names and the surrounding, or maybe you can use historic. I mean, it is okay to use, it is also okay to use those administrative geographical terms, but then just be ready that you may need to adjust if the territory changes. But using city names or town names is safer because town names don't change unless the big political change happen, which hopefully does not, right? And then if you're using the historical term of Kurzeme, Latgale, I mean, these are also a general terms which we understand where it goes, but it's not very restrictive, so to say. So yeah.
I have a question.
Yeah, okay.
Okay.
Yeah, Irina, go on.
Well, so as a representative of Sweden, I can already say that there are a lot of similarities between the processes of registering NGO in Sweden and in Latvia. However, I wonder one thing, like one of the features, particularly Sweden in comparison to many European countries, there is no unified law for non-profits. So it means that the non-profits have to navigate among a bunch of other laws, which in practice will be applied depending on the situation or the question. What is the situation in Latvia? Is there any law that you can read as a beginning organization, like the law for non-profits or something?
Yeah, that's right. So there is basically for non-profit organizations, there would be there's no like legally there is no a term like non-profit, but there is the law. There is a law on associations and foundations, and basically this is the law. This is the law for non-profits, because there's there might be another, no, but actually, so there's another, let's say another legal form, social enterprise, but they are made for profit, for different kind of profit, but still profit. If you want to make profit, you want to set up the company, and then there are laws on that for state institutions and so on. So basically, I could generally say that yes, for non-profits, there's a single law. It's a law on associations and foundations. And of course, then it comes with other laws. Let's say the law on public benefit organizations, right? If you want to work with donors that could get tax incentives for donations, then that's the next level. But anyway, if you want to start the new organization, then there is this one single law where it's enough to navigate that one. Yeah.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Okay, I had one more question.
Sure.
You mentioned that like normally the standard things that the organization might need for navigating is to have a bank account and compulsory to have accountancy and then a membership register. Yeah, so these are kind of documents or things that are needed in organizations management on a regular basis. I wonder for the annual reporting, what is the compulsory minimum and how does it happen? So maybe you could mention this, yeah, till which month, to whom, and what exactly do we need to report every year?
Okay. Yes, there's I would say that annual report comes along with the accountancy need. So if you have your accountancy established and kind of working, then the annual report is just the reproduction of accountancy results, right? So annual report has to be submitted every year by the end of March next year. So let's say for 2024, you will submit your annual report by March 31, unless it's a holiday. Then the deadline extends for a couple of days. Annual report, depending on how much money you have turned, how much money has been operated in your organization, the annual report will also be different. So there again, but then I don't want to go into too many details because of course there is like this single entry or double entry accountancy. Based on that, there's different ways of annual reports. But anyway, the basic thing is that the annual report is submitted to the State Revenue Service, which is another state institution which is monitoring the taxes and all the financial aspects of organizations. It is also done online through our electronic declaration system. There's an online template where you fill in, which is completely done online, where you fill in your balance sheet, where you fill in your income and expenditure sheet, and you also add some textual descriptions of the organizational success in the last year. The annual report must be approved by all members before it's submitted to the State Revenue Service. If the organization has no money involved, then basically the annual report consists just of zeros and some textual description of what happened in the last year. And it's fine. It's not, nobody can punish you for not having money in your organization. That it is fine to have zeros. But of course, if there is more money, then also the annual report becomes more comprehensive and might require more details and more explanations and so on. So yeah. Okay. So then I go on to the next topic, which was about where the money is hiding, or where organization can get some resources for its actions. So the first simple answer is that there's no single place where it is, right? There's no single place where you can unlock the door and there the money waits for you. No, it's not. That's not the way it works. You always have to remember that each organization has to find what's best for them. Number one. I think number two would be to keep in mind that nobody is obliged to support you. Like nobody, it's not like setting up an organization means that now you must help me. No, that's not the way it goes. And it should not be that way. So it's completely okay. When I say that it doesn't happen that way, I'm fine that it doesn't happen that way, because setting up the organization is your voluntary choice. It's your voluntary decision to start a new organization, and then we think of how we can operate. And actually, these decisions, or at least you should have thought about it already before you start your organization. You should think of what are those resources that will be needed as a minimum, and then of course you always can go for more. So I would say that the first major resource that each association has, it is your own voluntary work, your own energy, your own enthusiasm, and associations are based on that. And that is very logical, because it starts with us who want to do something, who want to change something, and we are ready to dedicate our thoughts, our time, our energy for things to get better. Then second major source, which unfortunately is not major source in Latvia, but it should be, is membership fees. Like if you think of some larger membership associations, especially the ones which are commercially driven, which is also, as I mentioned, possible that not all associations are for public good. There are, let's say, pharmaceutical association, like association for pharmacy specialists. They do association because they want to exchange their knowledge, and they also want to do their own advocacy work on legislation, right? So they want to achieve some benefit for them. And then, of course, it's so logical that they pay their own membership fees for their collective power to operate actively and positively and in good manner. But the same applies also for public good organizations. So I would say it is really okay if the organization has members and that members pay their membership fees. It depends how you agree, how much you pay, but I think it would be really fair if the membership fees cover at least your basic fundamental administrative costs. Let's say at one point you decide to open your bank account and it will cost you some 50, 100 euros per year. And then it's so logical that you cover these costs from your membership fees, for example. I'm currently, I have been, for example, member of, let's say, student association in university. That was a long time ago, sorry. We did not have membership fees at that time there. No, we did not, because we got some funding from university at the time, and the basic needs of the organization were covered from that university's funding. I am still, and I have been for many, many years, member of one association here in Sabile, where I live now, which was kind of facilitating the partnership between our town and the twin town in Netherlands at the time. Now that partnership is over, but the association is still active, doing some bringing people together and think of some smaller projects, activities that we can do together. And there we have an annual membership fee of 20 euros per year, which is like not huge money, but at the same time, it's more than a single euro. It's 20 euros. It takes some dedication from me that I want to pay that membership fee, and it kind of approves that I want to be a member of this organization. And at the same time, it also, at the end of the year, it makes enough amount totally for organization not to think of how to cover the bank fee, how to cover, okay, so we want to, I don't know, we want to send a letter to somebody, I mean, official letter to a municipality to ask for something. I'm dreaming now, but it could be possible. And then you need 2 euros for the postal stamp. I mean, ridiculous, but sometimes you need that, right? And then you have these 200 or 300 euros per year that are available for such small things. Or you have a meeting and you want to serve a coffee for your members in your membership meeting, right? It costs you some 5 to 10 euros, and then just you take them for membership fees, and that's fine. And the third example, I'm currently, since 2 years, I'm not just member but also in charge of the chairperson of this organization for development of Sabile, where we are approximately 10 members, and we have agreed to pay a membership fee of 150 euros per year, where it's a clear dedication that we want to, so that we want to make sure that if we want to do also some larger things, but still you cannot build the bridge from that money, right? And you cannot build a playground from that money. But let's say when we start now, for example, now we are considering to make a project of some of the watch out platform in Sabile. So all the technical projects and everything that will cost a lot of money. But then there are several first stages. We need to pay for the architect, or we need to pay for the topography of the project. And that costs, let's say, 300 euros, or something else costs 500 euros. That's enough money that none of us could pay individually, but that's not big enough to ask for that money for somebody else. So we are covering that kind of costs from our own membership fees. So so I would really encourage to think that when you set up an organization, it is fair that membership fees make some portion of your income. Then the next potential income source is donations. Donations from companies or individuals. And again, it takes an effort, but you may be successful, especially for specific projects where you come up with some maybe public objects or public events or something that might be interesting for wider society. Then that is a very potential source to raise money from donations, whether it's individual conversations with one or another person or company, through your bubbles, through your colleagues, through your net. And here it comes, as more people will be involved in your organization, in your bubble, as more networks you have, right? As more chances you have to get out to some companies or individuals to raise donations from them. whether you can organize a campaign or some action or some campaign would be better word, some fundraising campaign or public event for that. So basically, donation can be a very significant income source for some organizations. I would say another income source could be economic income or economic activity. In Latvian, we call it saimnieciskā darbība. You have to be careful with that, but it is possible to do some economic activity, either you produce something or you provide some services. Maybe you have some knowledge among members that you can provide to others, and then that can be a way how you raise money for your collective effort for the association. And then whatever goes beyond that, there's actually something I should have said at the beginning here is like legally, from at least in Latvia, any income is legally allowed unless it is specifically forbidden. So it is specifically forbidden to raise money from terroristic organizations, right? I mean, we talk about very extreme situations, but otherwise, for non-profit organizations in Latvia, any income source that legally is allowed in general out there, it can be also legal income source for us. So here we come again: membership fees, donations, your own economic income, and then any other potential partners. It can be municipality that might support you through some kind of annual or once from time to time support. It can be state support through some national institutions or ministries, and it can be various kind of projects. And this is where we come to the magic word of project, right? So the private foundations, community foundations, local or national institutions, or maybe it can be some international funding foundations. Or in other words, I would call that institutional funding, like EU funds or Erasmus funds, which is part of European Union, or the grant scheme that I was working for that I mentioned at the beginning of my story, the EEA grants, Active Citizens Fund, being part of that. So it's in Norway, Iceland, Liechtenstein. It's an international fund which gives money to other countries. It is international institutional funding. It's coming from those national governments, and through the special structures, it goes to project calls also in Latvia. So yeah, also this activity is funded by Erasmus project, which is then European EU funding. Christina, correct me if I'm wrong, but so that's how I understood it, right? So it's basically especially when it comes to youth work, then Erasmus is major funder in Latvia for sure. There's a lot of money available for diverse activities, but yeah. And then like one important thing that I need to mention when we talk about any kind of funding, whether it's private through donations or through private foundations, or whether it's through public calls, the most important keyword that you have to keep in mind is the compatibility of your intentions and funders' intentions. And just like I said previously, nobody is obliged to support you. Nobody is obliged to fund your activities or your core work or your office work. It's always about do we fit together? Do our targets or directions fit together? And that's why I have picked this picture, because you see it's like, well, first of all, I love seaside in general, but I really love those small rivers that flow, that try to get into the sea. But it takes almost a kilometer or sometimes even 2 kilometers for them to actually get through the beach and to go into the seaside, because their aims do not fit. The sea wants to get away from that river, but river wants to get into the sea, and their targets do not fit. So, well, at one point they do meet, it's again like what was that word, perseverance, right? Was that word that like if you try and you may be successful, but sometimes there are easier ways how to get money if you actually find a funder or supporter or donor individual or company that meets the same, that has the same intentions or the same goals as you do, and then you both are happy, like, hey, it's so great that we found each other. One person is happy to give you 5,000 euros for you to do something great that, maybe that company has been dreaming of doing this, but they never came to, like, how could we do? And then you are a group of enthusiasts who are happy to do the thing, but missing 5,000 euros. And that's perfect match. So like finding the right donor or funder is pretty much the key of getting easier money. Money will never be easy, but at least you can make it easier. But if you try to get money from funder, which has different objectives, then that will be super complicated money, because then you have to adjust your route. You have to try to prove and convince, and like it may take a lot of efforts on both sides. So yeah, if you are looking for money in a public call, I mean the project call, then really pay attention to the call text, to the rules, because if there is a public call published, there always is some call text that describes what the intention of funder is. They also have selection criteria, and read carefully those selection criteria, because that will help you to understand if you fit with each other. Okay, I see that the time is running, and I think I will switch to the next slide, then which then comes even to the next level, from setting up the organization to the project management. Yeah, we don't see a project here, right? I know, and that's the thing. I think in many cases, project feels like a big fog, like where are we heading to, right? So yeah, but that's exactly the reason for the picture. All of the pictures I show are from my private collection, so that's why there are no references or copyright references. Those are from the family collection. When it comes to defining a project, and again, whether it's for public funding, for project call, or it's a project that you want to submit to some company or donor, individual donor, it doesn't matter. In all of these cases, it is really important that you have a clear objective, clear meaning of what's the point of the project. And I really want you to encourage to avoid so-called project language. It's just like I don't understand why we have come to this, but it's already for 30 years. I mean, we are in democracy for 30 years, so we have never had more time of having projects or like public requests or so on for longer. But I don't really understand why this project language has become like the thing that many people think that is needed. I have been in a position where I have to read projects, and where I have to, in a selection process, right? When I have to read those project applications, it's just the most awful projects are the ones which are written in the project language, where people think that they have written it in a great complex language. And then I'm reading, and I try to understand, what are you trying to say? Like, I understand every single word in that sentence, but I don't understand the sentence together. And then it's so hard for me. And I cannot reduce points sometimes for you, because like there's nothing wrong in it, but nothing is clear to me. So I really encourage, so what I say is like, what I'm trying to say probably is that before you start writing any project, before you put anything on the paper, have your own picture of what you want to achieve. And maybe before you put it into text paragraphs, maybe put it in some scheme, some blocks or bubbles or balloons of your thoughts. So you have a picture, okay, so this is what we need, this is what we could do, and this helps to that, and okay, we do this because of that. So you have a clear picture, at least for yourself, what's going to happen and why it's important. and what's the meaning of the whole project. And then that will be helpful to build your project application, whether for public funding or for private funder or donor. It is important that you come up with, like, it's important that you understand what's the expected impact or results, what will change when the project happens, what will be the change that what the project will bring, and also make sure that the change is meaningful and necessary. Because during any project planning, it is always possible that you come to a conclusion that my project is not ready for submission at all, or you may come to a conclusion that my project is not good for this specific funder. For example, okay, the change is great, but it's not necessary in the context of this project call. It's probably your idea is not that, but it doesn't fit at this specific moment. Yeah, and if you have a clear objective, if you have clear what the impact will be, what the change will be, then yeah, of course, you also you will come to budget at one point, and it's important when it comes to budget, it's important that it is justified and logical, that it's not, again, like, and the costs are efficient. Doesn't always mean that it must be the cheapest, but efficient in a way that you understand, that you know why you are buying this or that, and have you looked at some alternative options, and have you thought of, like, why exactly this or that purchase. And yeah, I'm looking at time, so it means that we need to come to kind of a logical end, probably. These are topics that we can talk for centuries. So yeah, probably just a second, I will see if there are some final thoughts. That in my presentation, I put this kind of a structure, which is kind of, I do believe that you have seen this version, the similar phrases already. And just like I said at the beginning, when we think of setting up the organization, setting up the project, it's pretty much the same story. It's just on different scopes or different scales, probably. But yeah, I think what you see here is pretty much what I have already mentioned earlier. But yeah, when you have discovered what's the problem or what's the opportunity, why the project is needed, one thing that I didn't mention, and this is probably the last thing. So think about alternative options, how the problem could be solved. And this is in many cases one of critical problems of projects or project planners of the organizations, that people, instead of building the project because of the problem or because of the opportunity or because of the change, you set up the project because you have a clear thought that I want to do this. But why do you want to do that? And have you thought if the same problem or the same need or the same opportunity could be done with other kind of activities, maybe cheaper, maybe more effective, maybe kind of more interesting, and so on. So just do not concentrate on a single solution or single set of activities. Think of why you do it, and think of different ways how you could do it, different set of activities, that how one problem could be solved. Like if the problem is free time for kids, then it could be a playground, it could be activities in the library, it could be a book, it could be, I mean, you could think of 25 different activities that could be done to fill the free time of kids, and then you think which one is better here in this context. So here, this is one phase that in many cases we kind of skip, because we actually have our very clear thought, I want to build this playground. But why? Is this really the best thing to do right now? Maybe yes, but think about it. I think it's time to finish here. If you have any questions, go on.
Please, if there are any questions. Anita, Irina.
Yeah, I have. Again, Sweden here.
Yeah.
Okay, yeah, I wonder, it's like two questions in one. If you are planning to have to receive private donations on a regular basis, do you need some special additional kind of registration for your association, or, for example, a special kind of bank account to regularly receive donations, like private donations? This is one part of the question, and the second and similar question: if you plan to have some economic activity in your association, do you also need some additional kind of registration for that?
Okay, so here I think it might really differ from country to country. So I cannot comment on Sweden's situation here at all. But for Latvia, you don't. So one by one, economic activity, no special registration, no special anything. So basically, it's just something that every organization is allowed to do economic activity. It is important that economic activity does not become a primary purpose of the organization. It can only be as either as one of tools how you can reach your goal, one of ways how you can get some money, or just some extra side thing, but it cannot replace, because otherwise it becomes a business entity. So that's the only thing. Also, it does not require any other bank account. No. When it comes to accountancy system, so the accountancy needs to be restructured in a way, because once economic activity comes in, accountant has extra work on separating economic activity incomes and expenditures from other incomes and expenditures. But that's accountancy work. Donations, if your donors do not want to have any tax benefits from the donation, then no special additional registration. So any association from the moment it's registered can receive donations from individuals or from companies. No separate bank account is needed, no separate anything. It's just, again, within accountancy, it has to be separated and registered that we have received these donations and how they are used, how they are spent. But there is the separate registration called so-called public benefit organization status. That's how it's called in Latvia. And in many EU countries, there is some kind of special registration for public benefit or charity status or something. And this is something that usually allows it allows donors to get tax incentives or tax benefits, or some discount or tax, or some different versions of tax benefits. And that is possible in Latvia. For individuals, the tax benefit is some 20-25%, but simple to apply. For companies, the system is a bit more complex, and I will not go there. But again, if you feel that you want, so if you want to go into collecting donations more regularly, and if you feel that your donors are reluctant to give you money because you don't have this special tax incentive status, then you may consider to apply for the public benefit status. But without special needs, I would say don't do that immediately, because it's an extra administrative burden to the organization. So only do it when you actually need it, because there are many, and here's probably we need to look at some research, but maybe even not. Maybe you just have to ask your own donors. When you start talking to some potential donors, you need to ask, does it matter for you if we have this public benefit status or we don't? Because not many companies say that they will not bother with it anyway. And then you just don't need the status. You make life easier for yourselves. But even if you have public benefit status, still you don't need to have special bank account for that. It's just, again, separation in accountancy.
Thank you.
Maybe one more thing about this economic activity of the organization. Are there any limitations? How much is the maximum allowed, let's say, in percentage? So it is still counted as a non-profit association and not an enterprise.
Yeah, it's an interesting question, but there's nothing mentioned in the law. So it is always about interpretation. And it may happen that the organization's probably economic income is actually more than 50%. Like I would say, the general understanding could be that 50% is the moment when something is major or minor, right? But I think not always a specific number is the one that determines if the economic activity is primary goal of the organization. So the answer is no. There's nothing that specifically explains it.
But tax-wise, for example, isn't it?
No, also no. So if you have economic income, if your economic activity reaches the level of 40,000 euros per year, then you must register the value income taxpayer. Sorry, not income, value added taxpayer.
Yeah.
That's the thing that is so, because then you become just like any commercial at the point of 40,000 euros per year, you have to register for value added tax.
Okay.
Otherwise, not really. But
I
you
see.
have to be careful. I mean, if I think anybody will just understand yourself. If your income, if your economic income makes 80% of your annual budget, there are logical questions like how comes? If you have a logical answer why it's happening, like for example, it could be that you have 80% of your income from economic activities, but you use it all for public benefit. And you can clearly prove it, that it's not that all income is used for covering economic expenditure, but you actually produce profit that is used for public benefit. Then that could be a good explanation why it is okay. But it makes questions. It raises questions. Yeah. So, but not specific limitation mentioned anywhere.
One more question I wanted to ask you. Maybe you could mention just a couple of names, titles of funds or grants available, for example, at least for Latvia, for really like newcomer organizations. What could you recommend as easygoing funds to start with?
Any public funding will never be easy. On one hand, sure, it will always take some effort. So we mentioned already, if it's a youth field, then Erasmus program, 2 agencies, the youth agency and the state education agency. So both of these are one of places where funding is available on regular basis in rather large amounts. If it's a regional organization, I would always encourage to take a look at the opportunities if local municipality has some funding available for activities, some projects. Not all have, but many do have, and so it might not be available on a very regular basis. It may be, for example, at the beginning of year, once only. But anyway, so that's something to check. If the municipality has these options, then these options would be usually one of the easiest kind of ways how to start, because municipality is also more local, it's closer to your people, so it's easier to, just to give a call. I don't understand what's happening here. This kind of connection could be closer and easier to understand. On a national level, we have to remember there's an institution called Society Integration Foundation, Sabiedrības integrācijas fonds. They have several programs. Basically, that's a state foundation, which is administering majority of state funding for nonprofits. They have different programs for different directions, but there are several funds which are available on annual basis. And they have a clear structure of application, of selection and reporting. So that could also be, at least the structure is clear, you know how the things are working, and they have consultants available. And so, yeah. So I would say these are the ones where you can start. And then otherwise, I would really encourage you to follow some newsletters. So, for example, Civic Alliance Latvia has their weekly newsletter where they publish also those funding opportunities that they have identified. You can find their website nvo.lv, nvo.lv. That's the website of Civic Alliance. This is where you could sign up for the newsletter. And then, yeah, so that's the way how to find something which goes out of those annual basis, so to say. For start, that should be enough.
Great. Thanks a lot. Any last question? If yes, then yes. If no, then no. Okay, then I would like to thank you so much, Ansi, for your amazing presentation, answering all our questions, and sharing your beautiful family pictures. Felt like we're participating in an exhibition.